Just as a segue, just to mention some of the things we have seen, because I mentioned we looked at the government's adoption of cloud computing. So there are actually a lot of work going on in various US government agencies in adopting cloud computing, because they see it as a an easy way to quickly ramp up capability. We have had a lot of problems in building complete IT solutions from scratch, like tax system or even air traffic control system, things like that. I mean, our organization looks at that and we found a lot of problems, and that has been going on for a long time. But this is seen as maybe an easier way to accomplish the goal of getting the systems up and running quicker. The NASA, for instance, has something which is for scientific computing and web-based applications that they call Nebula, which is just a infrastructure as a service, meaning whole computing system, multiple servers and network and everything is packaged into a container, and you can deploy it for some agency to use it. And then DoD, Department of Defense, has this rapid access computing environment, which is actually a platform as a service. They provide a development facility that the government agencies can rent. This will have to be DoD. They can rent time on it to build applications without having to go through procurement and the process to buy their own computers and all, making it easier. And then actually we had in the summertime, with our stimulus that was going on in the United States, there was a program to trade in your old car for a new one, more fuel efficient one, and get some money from that. Get some refund, I think rebate. So that program had to be started very quickly. So the Department of Transportation had actually got public cloud, on the public cloud rented facility for the web server and all that, to quickly deploy that website and get it going. So that was one example. And of course, Google apps for government. Google advertises applications for US government, state and local and federal, where they promise that the data is going to be stored on servers in the continental United States, and it will be separate from the public. So it's like to give assurance to government that they can use it. So there are a lot of things like that are being considered by agencies, because they're seeing it as a new way of maybe getting systems up and running quickly. Now, just to segue from that to, because our topic is focused on IT solutions for businesses, I would just say that at least at the minimum, even for a small business around the world, I think in fact I have run into a lot of examples. Like some nonprofits I was working with, and they were doing all the email and the all the applications for Google Apps, Google Apps and Google Mail. That would be a software as a service. You can buy for a small fee all the email accounts and buy the facility to do word processing on their server, and the document is stored there. That model, software as a service, could be very efficient and easy way for businesses to take advantage of the cloud computing that's coming up now. And since there are many who are offering this already, some of the benefits, just to kind of reiterate and make the point, of course, the applications are going to be on the cloud, so they're always, you only have to sign up and you can immediately begin to use it. It's just like buying a product, right? just pay the fee, sign up, and you can log in and begin to use Google Mail or Google Apps. The other applications are going to be the data that if you're writing documents on Google Docs, well, they're stored in a server on the internet, so you can access them from anywhere, from home or from office or on the go, if any device that connects to the internet. You could get to this document and work on it. So that's somewhat of a beneficial thing, because you can work from anywhere and it's always there. And then you do get these data centers do have they're designed to be fault tolerance, redundancy, backup power. All those things are there. So, and then of course you're sharing the cost of the whole data center among all the users, and applications development cost, etc., is also shared. So you get the economies of scale, and you get the fault tolerance and the redundancy, just because you may not have the ability to do that on your own with your own resources, but you can take advantage of it just for a small fee. And in fact, that flexibility of signing on and using it, of course, gives you also the flexibility to drop it when you don't need it. So you can actually grow or make more use or less use depending on the business's need. And finally, I guess the paying for the service as you go, you don't have to tie up a lot of money in buying your own servers and systems and setting up your own infrastructure, so to speak. And instead you can use the money for other business reasons. So there are many good reasons for considering it, of course. So whether it's a private cloud or on the internet, that definitely is one new emerging trend that should be beneficial to businesses as to find new IT solutions, for their business. Now, not everything is rosy in the cloud computing area. There are some risks that people point out. One was the potential for locking in by a vendor. I mean, if you buy, depending on what level you're buying, if you're getting an application, I mean, the data is residing there. Can you move it to another, can you move that data to another software or not? That can be an issue. Or if it's a platform, if you develop using a programming language or maybe application programming interface they give you, that's from that vendor, maybe you cannot take the application to another place because that's a different, you need to write it in different API. So that kind of things can happen, but I would say that concern is really not any different from if you bought your own, decided to use Linux or Windows or whatever platform you pick, and you decided to write your application in one language or another. It's a similar situation. If you want to move now from Windows to Linux, you might have a problem also, similar kind of situation, right? So that may not be a big issue. The other bigger issue we found from talking to the government agencies was their concern about the security. Although they were positive also, they had positive and negative. The positive aspect was they thought that these data centers, they usually are very good, they have a lot of staff, people there. They have automated tools, and they can actually quickly patch the system, for instance. If there's a security problem, they can update the system. They could do those things more easily than oftentimes private businesses or, for instance, any government agency. So in that sense, that was a positive point. But they also saw the risk because the vendor who is giving you the service promises to give their security and whether you can depend on them or not. This is like a shared responsibility. And of course, also, we had, like I said there, like 22 of 24 agencies saw some risk. And one reason was there is a law in the United States, one of the businesses, government agencies have to follow this law. It's called FISMA. It's like basically Federal Information Security Management Act, something, from 2002. So that requires them to certify that the system is secure, but they're not sure how to certify that the system is secure if it's not run by them. So that's where we have a situation where there's some guidance needed. But this is primarily, of course, for the United States side. But I assume that similar kind of concern might arise here as well, if you're going to go to cloud computing. Now, I mentioned all this about the taking advantage of cloud computing those are like the server side implications, on the back end system where your processors are, where your applications are. What I mean by this particular point is that there is implication on the client side, all the things we talked about, how everybody with smartphones or any internet connected device or PC or anything can now make use of the services. Well, that implies that, if you're a business, you should think about your customers or your own internal users being able to access your services that are on the cloud, which are going to be easily accessible if you provide easier way to access them. And what I mean by that is those applications that you see, they're the smartphone apps, for instance. Maybe your business wants to promote itself. You might consider having smartphone app for your business for different platforms so that they can get to your back-end cloud service. That would be probably a good strategy to follow for any business. Finally, I think I have only a few more minutes left. I'll just quickly switch to a little bit on the telecom regulations that are coming up, or at least being talked about in the United States, and in the light of the convergence that's emerging. Not that there has been any legislation passed, but many people in the Congress are talking about the need for more regulation because they see that the bundles of service have emerged, right? And they're not regulating them. Sometimes they get worried that maybe it's not being done right or whatever. So this debate has been going on now that maybe new regulations are needed beyond that 1996 Act to regulate these services. And of course, there are many camps, right? One side might want regulation, one doesn't want. So that's debate going on. And the net neutrality, which we had Tim Jennings ask the question of the panel previously, that happens to be also something that comes up. And just like I think we had someone from Google, right? Ted, he replied about net neutrality. In that debate, I just want to point out that this network layered model is often brought up in discussing that, saying that, well, network neutrality implies that whatever is going on in this physical layer, the bits that are going around, should not be affected by what application they belong to. you just simply let them go. It's like a road on which any car can go kind of thing, as long as you observe the, whatever, some posted rules and protocols. So that argument is brought up a lot of times, that if you do not allow network neutrality, the good thing that you got from this nice layered model would be violated, Now, I don't know whether it's true or not. I'm not going to try to comment on whether it's one way or other, but that debate comes up quite a bit. Now, in terms of specific activities, our Federal Communications Commission actually was taking action against Comcast, one of the cable company, that was trying to control control the flow of traffic from a BitTorrent. You might know the name BitTorrent, which is a peer-to-peer network. They thought that it was using too much bandwidth, so they were controlling, they're throttling that, transfer. And FCC took some action against Comcast in 2008, and then the Comcast went to the courts, and the courts eventually in 2010, recently in April, they ruled that FCC has no standing to take any action against Comcast. So some people thought that was a signal from the court that network neutrality is not needed. But then in August 2010, just recently again in summer, Google and Verizon actually proposed a framework for legislators saying that that basically gives us network neutrality for wired broadband or wired internet. But they were saying that wireless should be exempt because it's changing too fast. So again, the debate is going on. So nothing is really resolved there. I just simply point out as something that will affect, obviously, in the United States, and maybe it would affect if you have debates like this out here as well. And sometimes some of these things can affect everybody, because if they're controlling some traffic there, well, it's interconnectivity everywhere, so everyone gets affected. On the other point I wanted to make was FCC also takes care of the spectrum. And of course, we talked a lot about how we will get benefits from connectivity, but the broadband on the wireless side requires spectrum to provide the broadband. And at least in the United States, they have problem finding big chunks of spectrum to do that. And so there has been some move to, I think we had in our stimulus act, the act that was giving a lot of money to do various infrastructure, there was a requirement for FCC to develop a national broadband plan. And they did develop a plan which is sort of talks about goals, and the goals are all very good and laudable goals to find spectrum. For instance, they want to get 100 megabit, which you might have in Korea already, but 100 megabytes to 100 million homes by 2010. That was one of the goals. They also want to find 500 megahertz of spectrum, free up 500 megahertz of spectrum for use in wireless broadband connections and all. They also look into requirement for broadband connectivity for smart grid, which we saw in previous presentation examples. So those have been activities that are going on. One recent development was FCC in September 24th of this year. They did approve the use of some, they called it white space, I guess, between TV stations, because all of our television now moved to, from analog to digital, and they have kind of freed up some, or they're saying that companies can use this white space for super Wi-Fi. I mean, Wi-Fi maybe longer range, but the whole thing is very early now, and nothing has been implemented yet. And I think, we'll see where it goes also. So I didn't want to take too much time. I hope I'll be within the 30 minutes limit. I wanted to end with this slide, actually, because we always go to government agencies, and we always say that progress has been made, but much remains to be done. And there's a positive thing here as well. This is actually one of our report was comparing all the broadband adoption in different countries. And Korea, of course, well, in OECD ranking, it comes like 7th, but they have different measure or whatever. And then there's another ranking where it comes up number 1, the household penetration or something. Penetration in the household is almost 100% kind of number. So, of course, as you can see, I mean, it's great here, but it's not the same. Even in the United States, it's way down, and many other parts of the world, it hasn't gone there yet. So, obviously, even in this, even though we are very positive and forward-looking and how things are going to be great in the future, but I feel like we have to be somewhat realistic and understand that it's not there yet. I mean, we still have a long way to go, and I guess the nice thing is I assume the journey will continue and we'll, be able to get there someday. I think I would probably just stop with that. I hope I gave you a little bit of insight into cloud computing and virtualization and good things about the network layered model and how all of this has benefited us so far. And it remains to be seen from now on whether we continue to get the benefits or not, depending on what we do. obviously it'll affect, and we'll have to see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you for the very insightful speech.